closest thing I have to like a race motor. Brings me back to my go-karting days. 2-cycle. Smell that oil.
Yo, I ain't here for the money, I ain't here for the fame. Though it might be nice to own a jet plane, I'ma do it all for you. Come along to see it's true, but the world is pretty cold. You might need a sweater too. I'ma put a ride on ya. Kid from California, trying to make it in life. In school they never taught ya. Dreams of my own, I've been working from home. I can do it on my own, but sometimes it gets cold like.
Hope you enjoyed that little montage of our dinghy Rocco on board SV Panda. So this is our dinghy Rocco. His name is Rocco because the name is Sirocco or Sirocco. This one here is a model 310 Sirocco. Absolutely like perfect to fit our boat. It was recommended from the cruising community to fit the biggest dinghy you can on the front of your boat. So this 10-foot dinghy is just about does it on our ML. Another option that we chose on this dinghy is to make sure we got an aluminum hard floor dinghy. In other words, called a R.I.B or rigid inflatable boat. Everyone says that really handles the waves better and it lasts longer, easier to beach. All sort of pluses for us if you don't mind storing a large tender on the foredeck of your boat. Another option we went with is the lightest model. This one doesn't have a double floor, so it's just a V-hull, and it makes it very light, only about 120 pounds for the whole dinghy. So even just 2 people, we can kind of wrestle it up on the deck with the help of a winch. Some of the things we like about our tender is the high bow is a very high cut bow and very deep V-hull. So it's great when it's pretty wavy out. It's able to cut through the chop and we don't get as wet as we see other tenders getting. We also found this tender can seat 6 people pretty comfortably, like 3 on each side. And we can't get up on plane with 6 people, but we could still move decently fast with 6 people, which is rad. We also chose this dinghy because of the material. Instead of PVC, it's hyperbolon. It's a little more difficult to work with apparently, but it's supposed to last longer and be better at UV ray like degradation. Another feature we liked about this tender is the towing eyelet in the front is super beefy. We're looking at other tenders and they just weren't quite as strong, but this had a really thick, like 1/4-inch aluminum eyelet that's welded. Now we're gonna talk about some of the bad things. We've been cruising now for a month, using Rocco pretty regularly, and there's a few things that if we were, say, designing our own tender, we definitely do different. One of the things we don't like is the oars are mounted right on top. That's fine for when you're rowing, but we'd prefer them to be inside and underneath the where the frame is. That way it tucks them off where you sit. The oars work fine when you're rowing and they are detachable, but if they could be detached and moved down below in the hull kind of out of the way, that would be ideal. We've seen some other brand of tenders that have that feature, and I think that's a great solution. A small detail is where the motor mounts to a bracket on the transom. The bracket's, it's aluminum, but it's just painted and the paint is already chipping away. We haven't had a motor mounted for more than just really this month that we've been cruising, and it's already chipping away pretty decently. It's not a big structural deal, but it's just an annoyance. All right, next we're gonna talk about the motor. This is, to me, one of the most important parts about a tender is the motor that you choose. We specifically bought this motor in Bahamas because you can't get a 2-stroke motor in the United States. So this bad boy is a Yamaha Enduro 2-stroke 15 horsepower motor. This motor flies. That's like the biggest benefit that we have to it is we could probably get going like 20 miles an hour. The boat can get on plane. We can cruise with like 3 people and scuba gear and on plane, like no problem. If you're just by yourself, it is actually like wicked fast. You can't even use full throttle, especially if you're going into the wind, like you're gonna catch air. We heard from the cruising community that the Yamaha Enduro specifically has been around for 15 years plus. They haven't changed this design, so parts are very common all around the world, which I like. Another reason I chose two-stroke is the weight. It's a lot less weight for the same horsepower. This motor weighs about 80 pounds, where if I were to get a four-stroke model, it would have been in the 120-pound range, which is a bit tough to pick up and handle. Another reason I chose the two-stroke is I'm pretty sure at some point the motor is going to go in the drink, and if we need to tear this motor apart bit by bit, a two-stroke is way more simple. You don't have any valves or cams or timing gear. The whole upper end is just super simple. There's no oil, so take it apart, put it all back together in an afternoon. It's that simple. Another thing we like about the motor is there's a lot of trim options. So for instance, if we're in a shallow water, we can flip a lever, get the motor up a bit, and that way if we do touch bottom, it touches on this skeg here and it's not a problem. There's a lever here just to keep the motor up like this. And then the other controls is we have a neutral, we have a reverse, and we have a forward gear option. It just makes it really easy to drive. I don't know, I've never driven many other dinghy motors, but having the lever is just fine. All right, so in this time that we've been cruising, we've made some adjustments and arrangements to the components we have inside the tender at all times, and want to talk about that. Maybe it'll help some of you out. So one of the items that we have in here is a lock. It's not really just for security, although that helps, but it's mostly just to keep everything inside the tender. So worst case, if the tender were to flip for whatever reason, at least all the components are attached to the tender and we can retrieve them, including the motor. The other thing I want to talk about is we have an ammo can. In this ammo can, we keep a spare toolkit, as well as a VHF radio, and like a few other like small supplies. It's just nice to always have kind of a dry lockbox on the tender, since we don't have like an anchor lock or anything like that. When we bought this motor, it came with a gas tank and a long fuel line, so no problem there. One that we've added inside the tender is a lifting harness. I took some Dyneema, did some spliced ends, have a little shackle. This is a harness that attaches to 2 points in the transom and 1 point in the bow. And so it's just like a single lifting. So we can lift it up on the side of our boat if we need. Last, for stuff inside, we always carry a set of flip-flops, because when you go to shore, you need something to be able to walk around. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this tour of Sirocco. Been an awesome tender overall. We definitely have to recommend them. If there's like one item of a tender, when you're choosing a tender, that I'd recommend, it's the motor. Pick the biggest motor you can fit or afford on your tender. This motor is 15 horsepower. Sometimes with just one person, it is like too much power. So again, with more power, you can always reduce the throttle, but with a smaller motor, you can't increase the power. So I want to say, we found this tender through another sailing channel called Sailing Uma. If y'all haven't subscribed to them, subscribe. They make fantastic content, and they found this company in Fort Lauderdale and bought a smaller version of this tender and the same motor. And their review was fantastic, and it really helped us figure out what kind of tender we wanted. So recommend checking out Sailing Uma. I'll put a link to their channel in our description. I hope you enjoyed our take of the tender. We really like it. We hope we get many years of service from this tender. And yeah, hopefully you'll get to watch them in all of our future videos. Cheers, everyone. Dynasty Racing, performance everywhere.